Don't worry, folks, 'tis I. But I think I'm going to have to go and turn that light on, actually, because I don't want to strain my precious little eyeballs, do I? There we go. Now, back in the land of light, I think that the sound is working now. Okay, I tried this show a couple of minutes ago, and apparently the sound wasn't working, but I switched over to a different browser, and now, miraculously, for no reason at all, it does work. And I was about to put my headphones on then, until I thought, you know what? Why do I need headphones? There's no one else on the show this week. I don't need to hear anything at all. In fact, it'll just be a hindrance and a distraction. You'll be able to see slightly less of my head, so slightly less of the luxurious hair that's slowly growing back in with every passing week. So there is going to be some more spoopy horror content later on, but I think that's going to be the final segment of the show. There's going to be a very, very spoopy story, which I'm sure will send shivers down the spines of everybody and send everyone to sleep tonight to horrific nightmares, and they'll wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night at the sheer terror that was drilled into their brains and, in fact, their very souls on 2D6 Friday. But, of course, we do have some wargaming issues to discuss first. Let's have a look who's in the old chat tonight, shall we? On the fabled active users list. We have Andrew Fairbanks, Bazooka J. Rambo, Brendan Duffy, Dice Miniature Paint Guy, Ethan Love, and I'm back, and hopefully you can see me. There's two of me now. Yep, for some reason the browser window just crashed completely there. So do you know what I'm going to do? I am going to close down all the other windows in this particular browser apart from this one, just to make sure we don't have any more technical difficulties tonight. I think there's still two of me in the Hangout right now, technically. I'm sure that one will disappear very shortly. And let's see. Let's see if I can eject the other me from the Hangouts and see what happens. There we go. You should be able to see me now, in theory. Can you see me, ladies and gentlemen? Let me know if you can lay eyes upon my glorious visage. Should be 100% back to normal now. Okay. By the yays in the chat, I think you can actually see me now. Okay, excellent. So, you may think this is the first time that this channel has been cursed with technical difficulties, but last week was actually something much more bizarre. On last week's Friday show that I did with Dreddy, you see, after the show had finished, there weren't any issues at all during the live stream, but when someone watched the recording, they said, actually, there's a slight issue, and that slight issue is that it's desynced the audio by about 5 minutes. Not only did it desync the audio, it desynced the audio to before we actually went live on the air. Audio footage that should never have actually been recorded by YouTube or Google Hangouts was broadcasted for the first 5 minutes of the video. So you got to hear lots of pre-show preparation. So it's lucky we weren't just making fun of all the audience and talking about what suckers they are, giving us all that advertising revenue. Although, technically, I probably shouldn't have said that either. But yeah, there wasn't anything controversial said, luckily. And then I had to download the entire show, edit off a certain part of it. We actually lost about 5 minutes in the middle of the show because the audio completely went back to normal about roughly 50% of the way through the show. So I just had to sync it back up the first half, which was still quite laggy on the recording for some reason, and then just snip off 5 minutes right in the middle of the show. So that was quite annoying. Okay, I think only 1 or 2 people actually saw the exclusive behind-the-scenes look, though. So not many people at all were treated to that before it was fixed, thankfully. Otherwise, you would have known what goes on behind closed doors. You would have known how much painstaking preparation goes into these shows, or how little painstaking preparation in some cases. So, it feels weird not having the headphones on. It feels like I'm not talking to anybody. Okay, let's start off. I did ask the audience for some questions on Facebook as well, so we're going to get to those. And some of those might lead to some fairly controversial topics coming up. And then we've got all the various spooky bits. First of all, though, the traditional start after greeting the audience and then the hangout crashing is to head over to the various new releases to see what there is. So these are the GW pre-orders at the moment. Burning of Prospero, which of course everyone already knows about. Vox Tenebris, audio drama on CD, which I'm sure is very, very exciting. Let's have a look at this box contents for reals now, shall we? You can actually get 360s now. That's exciting. So this guy, as I was reliably informed, is not 1000 Sun, as I may have inadvertently called them last week after they were mislabeled on a different website. I just realised that's a stick with a bolt gun on the end. That seems a tad excessive. Yeah, they're all right. Let's have a look at the 360 of this guy. This is more like it. I like the kind of winged, feathery bits that you get on shields. I think they're very easy to paint, and it's very easy to make those look good. If you saw any of my Deathwing Knights, for example, they have that kind of effect on their shield, and I think it's very, very simple to get a good look going on. Just with a bit of washing and highlighting, very, very easy, just nice straight lines, nothing too complicated, not like those tiny little scrawlings there, those tiny little lines. It's probably a bit more time consuming to get them that fine. Let's move on. It's an interesting tattoo on the back of the head. I wonder if that's just freehand on there, that tattoo. This thing on the cloak probably isn't freehand, I would guess. It does seem to stick out a little bit, but the tattoo, I'm going to guess, probably is. Yeah, they look all right. What else have we got? Oh, there's this wolf guy, Captain Wolfie Pants, as he's going to be known from now on, or Captain Wolfie Pigtails, actually, with his big giant claw and his magical sword, no doubt. Little tassels hanging off his shin pads as well. A nice touch. Who else has got 360? This guy. Now this looks a bit more evil, doesn't it? Very typical of the current cloaks. Everything's kind of swaying in the breeze nowadays. Then these do actually look really cool. I like these guys. Not enough to buy the box probably, but I do think they look pretty damn tasty. Oh, Mr. Bazooka J. Rambo says that there are transfers in the box that you can do this with. So if you feel like transferring onto the back of someone's head, you can now do that. Let's see. I don't like the look of this guy as much in these ultramarine colours. I think in other colours he'd look nice. He looks very beefy and mechanical, doesn't he? Then these guys, which look like your kind of early Terminator types. Fairly cool. And what's this last one? About the same thing, but with claws. Or they actually look more like just knives, don't they, on this guy? Looks like he's just sellotaped some knives to the back of his hand. Well, let's move on from that. Nothing else interesting on the GW site. So, Mantic, the one thing that jumped out at me here, is that for Dead Zone, they've actually put the Nexus Psi book up for sale on its own now because people were complaining that they already had enough Plague miniatures, or they already had enough terrain, or they already had the Dr. Simmons. So why wasn't the book available on its own? And now it is. So there you go. Public demand, Mantic provide. And I've actually got that book right next to me, and I'm going to look at that in a minute. Not too in-depth, because I'm going to do a full video on it. Then I was also browsing Warlord's website. Again, I heard people complaining about something from them. And the source of the complaints for Warlord products was... Have I just lost it? Where's it gone? Should be on this page somewhere, I think. There we go. Turrets. So these are the turrets for Conflict 47 that you can fit onto your World War II style tanks. people weren't too thrilled that they were £12.50 each, when you could basically buy the new tank for twice that, I think. So the entire turret costs as much as the rest of the vehicle, almost. So I suppose it's reasonable if you compare it to other manufacturers and their turrets. I'm thinking the likes of Forge World. I'm sure Forge World still do individual turrets. They're quite expensive. I do think these are a tiny bit on the expensive side. I don't usually pay that much attention to all their other systems outside of bolt action, but might as well have a quick look while we're here. Lots of Hail Caesar things, which isn't really my thing, and Judge Dredd, we're going to be talking about that as well, if you couldn't guess from the old video thumbnail. Not necessarily for reasons you might expect, though, but we'll get to that. Have they got anything else? Gates of Antares hoodie. If you want to be the coolest kid on the block, or the coolest kid down at the games club, then surely you want a Gates of Antares hoodie. Maybe. Planes. Let's just skip right past those. German stuff. Nothing Belgian in the new releases, I've noticed. So for that reason, we're not going to spend too long looking at it, because unless it's Belgian, it's not that exciting when it comes to bolt action, I'm afraid. So let's see what people have been saying. Sebastian Blau likes Hail Caesar. It plays very smooth, apparently. Okay, why is people talking about Street Fighter? Oh, I see, the lightning claws. Yes, I see. Who, like me at the start of this show, does wear a mask to cover his wonderful face, which is almost as wonderful as mine. Dice Miniature Paint Guy. Love this 30k, holding hard onto my monies. Is your wallet trying to escape from your pocket as we speak? You got to keep a good tight grip on it to make sure that you don't do any sleep shopping. I'm sure that's happened to the best of us. Let's see, Fluffy Dread doesn't play 40k, but thinks they are nice sculpts. Yes, they are. Very, very nice indeed. Let's see, Sebastian Blau. This is what the old Grey Knight weapons look like. Halberds with bolt guns. I'm not a big fan of the old bolt gun halberd look. Fluffy Dread. Apparently this is the first time Fluffy Dread has tuned in for this show live. Well, there's a first time for everything, isn't there? Almost. Let's see, Bazooka J Rambo. How come the Andy and Rem show is fine, but twice now 2D6 Friday hasn't worked properly? I think it's a Rem conspiracy. If he had any technical know-how whatsoever, then I would agree with you. But I don't think he even has the technical know-how to actually click to watch this show, let alone actually hijack it and sabotage it somehow. Okay, so we're going to go to some of the questions that came in from the audience on the old Facebook group. So here we go. This first one is from Jeremy, who says, what do you think of the recent sale and acquisition of Wild West Exodus from Romeo's Outlaw Miniatures to Wayland Games' new miniature division, War Cradle? What impact do you think this will have on the game by bringing the franchise and production from the USA to the UK? Well, that's quite a complicated issue, isn't it? So, Wild West Exodus isn't a game I've ever really sampled. Wild West isn't a topic of particular interest to me, but I know there are people out there that like the system. And from what I've heard, the rule set is very solid. There's nothing wrong with it. I haven't really heard complaints about the game itself. As far as what it means for the game, I think possibly one thing that could have held it back to this point is the fact that the owner of the company isn't exactly Mr. Popular in the industry and the community. Now, I don't think that's really a controversial thing to say. I think it's pretty widely accepted that that is his reputation. I've never actually spoken to him, so I don't have an opinion on him one way or the other. I'm just going by what a lot of people have said and what the general undercurrent and feeling seems to be. It tells you something that at both Adepticons I attended, there were like stickers and flyers all around the place saying rather disparaging things about him, about Mr. Romeo. I've seen him on a couple of Beasts of War videos, I think. That's the only time I've heard him speak, I believe. So I don't have any view on him either way. I don't have enough info to make an informed opinion, but people don't seem to like him. And I think a lot of it came down to some of their business practices. I think maybe they sued a smaller company or something. I heard something along those lines. And generally, people just didn't like him. So maybe that put some people off getting into the game system once they heard that it was affiliated with Battle Foam, which is another product that hasn't really appealed to me because I already had some foam before I was exposed to all the companies. I already had some KR multi-cases. So maybe moving on to someone else will actually help the popularity of the game. However, when you look at who it's moved on to, Wayland Games and their new miniatures division, they're not exactly Mr. Popular either, the old Wayland Games. Since Total Wargamer pretty much vanished, they might actually still be up and running as a shop, but in terms of an online distributor, Total Wargamer just completely shut down. Since they disappeared, Wayland Games are kind of the new target of hate for people when it comes to really, really slow delivery times and poor customer service, I think. Not many people have nice things to say about Wayland Games at all. I've placed one order with them, ever, I think, apart from when I actually went down there for Grumpy Old Wargamers and I bought some things on the day, which was fine, obviously, because they had it right there. I was just able to pick it up and pay for it and then leave. Did actually pay for it. I placed one online order with them, and it did take quite a few weeks to arrive. Quicker than Total Wargamer. Total Wargamer took about 2 months to deliver an item to me. But what I've heard with Wayland Games, I have no idea whether this is true or not, so don't take this as fact, because I'm not a wargaming distributor, but from people who should be in the know, in theory, have told me that often, for a start, they apparently don't carry that much actual stock, so they have to order everything in. And secondly, when it comes to new releases, if you order a new release from Wayland Games, the word on the street is that they don't order it straight away. I don't know whether this is still the case, it's just a story I heard, but apparently GW have a system where, for example, the top 10 releases for any, or the top 10 products, the best-selling products for any particular time, you get a more favorable rate on them. However, new releases take a month to become top sellers, don't they? Because when they've just been released, obviously none have been bought yet. So they would wait until the product falls into the top selling category and they could get a better rate on ordering it and then sending it to you, which would explain big delays. That's what I've heard from a couple of different sources. You would have to ask them whether it's true or not. If any representative of Wayland Games is actually watching this show and would like to deny that potentially slanderous accusation that other people have made about them in the past, then feel free to get in touch with me and I'll let the people know what your side of it is. But safe to say they don't have the best reputation either. So passing from one person who's not that popular to a company, another entity that isn't too popular either, I don't think it'll actually make any difference whatsoever in terms of people being put off the product by the reputation, because anyone who is going to be put off by the reputation of an owner is probably going to be equally put off by the reputation of a company, I would say. Maybe even more so, actually, because if you just don't like someone, maybe you still don't have an issue with the way they do business, maybe, or the way whether they get their miniatures to you on time. So it'll be an interesting one. In terms of moving the manufacturing from the US to the UK, if there's a bigger market for it in the UK, I imagine that could only be a good thing business-wise for the future of the game, if they're having to spend a lot less money shipping it all around the world. If their big market was actually in the US, then it could have the reverse effect. I don't know whether Wild West stuff is big over here or whether it's bigger in America. I would imagine it's bigger in America, old cowboys and whatnot. But you never know. I haven't looked into their financials. So, yeah, interesting. But this isn't the first time, of course, that a big wargaming distributor or trader has picked up a game license, because recently Troll Trader, I think it was, picked up Carnivale, which is another one that I saw a lot of on Beasts of War, actually. I think that was Vesperon Games that did that. And they sold that on to Troll Trader. So it seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment that these companies that have more of a kind of business and distribution infrastructure are buying up the kind of licensing to these games, that maybe the company that launched them didn't have the necessary setup to expand it any further, perhaps, if that makes sense. I think I explained that well enough. So, yeah, and it happens with some Kickstarters as well. A company that launches through Kickstarter gets the game expands, gets too big for their boots, basically, and then they pass it on to someone who's already got a big setup. Like all these big distributors have their big giant warehouses, and they have all this network of supply and whatnot. So it makes sense that those companies want to move into that side of it. So I think we could end up seeing a lot more of that, because basically anyone can launch a game now. Anyone and their dog can go on Kickstarter and get their game funded. The real challenge is actually keeping it going beyond the Kickstarter, I think. And that's where some of them seem to struggle. Let's see. Bazooka J. Rambo talking about Element Games. Apparently he likes them better since I mentioned them some time back. Yeah, Element Games have very good service. They deliver very, very fast. Element Games and Firestorm Games are the two I usually go to. I check out the prices on those two sites when there's a new release, typically. And then whichever one's cheaper or whichever one has more things in stock, or they have slightly different thresholds for free delivery, I think. So depending how much I want to order would affect which one I order from as well. But those are the two main ones that seem to carry the widest range of stock that I typically order from. And Element Games, just in terms of a place, the Northwest Gaming Centre is much nicer than it used to be since it changed ownership a few months ago, and they've done it up a bit. It's much nicer in there now. Nice and clean. The toilets smell nice. So I can definitely recommend people visit Element Games. Even the shop section is much, much bigger now. It's a very, very nice place indeed. I can't speak for Firestorm Games, but by all accounts, that's a nice place as well. That's just not particularly close to me, so I've never been there. Okay, let's have a look at the next one then. If anyone's got any comments on that whole issue, Wild West Exodus and so on, if anyone's got any opinions on that game, whether you think I should check it out, whether it's any good, let me know. The next question, this is kind of similar, from Graham Rigg, who says, what do you think about Mongoose's inability to follow through and sustain a project? Just as Warlord are fulfilling Mongoose's Judge Dredd Kickstarter for them, they have dropped the license. Previously, they were involved in Starfleet battles, a similar story. I actually, when I saw this question, I didn't know too much about it because I haven't really followed the old Judge Dredd game very much. But I went onto the Kickstarter page to see the announcement that they weren't continuing selling the products anymore. And in fact, I don't think Warlord are after November either. I think they're just disappearing. So the Judge Dredd stuff, the Kickstarter stuff is all going out, from what I know. It is actually going to the backers, even though it's several years late, I believe. And then people will be able to order other stuff in the Judge Dredd line from Warlord for another month, and then it's disappearing. As far as I know, that is the state of play. If anyone knows anything different on that, let me know. But that's all I was able to uncover. And on that, I would say that's a risk, isn't it, really, with Kickstarters? Especially on a game system. If it's just the miniatures you're after, then it's fine, because by the time you get them, even if it takes 5 years to get your miniatures, you're still going to get them in your hand, you're still going to be able to paint them. If it's actually a game system, though, and there's a big delay on it, and it kind of drops off the face of the earth by the time you actually get your models, then that can be a big problem. Which is why I would say if you're going to back any new game system on Kickstarter, make sure you like the models first and foremost. If the rules are what are drawing you in, then that's possibly not enough, unless it's from a company that you know is really reputable and has a reputation for seeing all their projects through to the end, and then long-term support for them as well. Let's see. Anyone got anything to say on that? Dino Titan Edition says that is sad, since the Judge Dredd game is actually quite nice. I had heard that people liked the game, actually. Bazooka J. Rambo. Thunderchild are a small one-man outfit, but managed to get their Kickstarter pledges out and keep his main range going too. Yes, he is actually doing really well, actually. Old Jason of Thunderchild Miniatures with Wasteman and Yo-Man and so on. those Kickstarters, as far as I know, nothing's really been late on any of his Kickstarters, and he does keep just knocking out new releases every now and then as well. And the system is still going. He's not just packed it in. Let's see. Adam Johnson, Andy, did you back Warpath? I haven't backed any Kickstarters outside of small pledges for a little while now, quite a few months. I backed a couple just to get one model on a couple of recent Kickstarters, but mainly I'm not going in for any at the moment, any big ones, just for financial reasons, and I can't really justify it when I've already got so many miniatures around I still need to paint. Just on my painting table here, I'm not going to get all that stuff painted in the next few weeks. Then I've got drawers and boxes full. I've still got the entire Dungeon Saga Kickstarter unpainted. I haven't even played that yet. I've got drawers full of sprues for other systems, so I couldn't really justify backing a big Kickstarter at the moment. Let's see. Where was I? Throne of Angels says Wild West Exodus is a fun game but needs a bit of work on balance. Yeah, everyone I've heard talk about the game says that it's pretty fun. It's a nice system. So hopefully Wayland can get it shipshape. Let's see. Okay, so in terms of delayed Kickstarters, the ones that I've had experience with, there's been the two main ones which were kind of linked were Arcane Factories and Creature Caster. So Arcane Factories had a range of just individual miniatures which were supposed to be kind of the mounts, some of them, to ride on the Creature Caster creatures or monsters. So they were around the same time. Arcane Factories, I think I know pretty much what happened with that one, because it was kind of a one-man operation, and the one man became absolutely swamped with his main 9-to-5 job, or hours even beyond that probably. So I can understand why that was slow, but that has been picked up by someone, and that is actually moving along, and I recently filled in my pledge manager thingy, so hopefully I'm going to get, I think it was a vampire I ordered from them, so that's going to be coming soon hopefully. Creature Caster, on the other hand, is a slightly more complicated beast, because that did amazingly well on Kickstarter, raised an awful lot of money, and then there were updates sporadically for a few months, and then there was an awful lot of silence, which got people very nervous. And as far as I know, the latest, because when I was doing my research on Creature Caster the other day to see where it was up to, it seems as though they've changed the shipping. When they were actually running the Kickstarter, the promise was that they would have distribution centers to ship all the Kickstarter pledges into the different continents, like one in USA, one in Europe and such. But from what I've heard now is that they're shipping everything from Canada, which means, according to people who are complaining on the Kickstarter page, it's going to cause people to spend a lot more money on some kind of import tax, because these miniatures are quite expensive, and you have to declare the value on them. And then there's a certain tax attached to that when you're importing it from another country, which they are now, because they're suddenly sending everything from Canada. Oops, did I just knock the microphone? But apparently some people are going to be charged like 4 or 5 times the amount of postage that they were originally, because some people backed it quite heavily and got like 10 really expensive miniatures. Those people could be hit with a really large fee if they actually want their products still. For me, I think I only backed it for $1 because I was only into it because I was obviously the A-list wargaming journalist. So me and a couple of the chilling wargamers people, we were told, hey, when it's all done, we'll just send you a couple of models. I said, oh, that's great, then I'll just back it for $1 just so you have all my details. So from a personal standpoint, I'm not that concerned if I actually get anything out of it, because it's much more important that people actually paid hundreds of dollars actually get their products. And at the end of the day, I didn't really put much in other than just do a couple of live shows with the creator. So it's not that important for me to actually get anything from it. It would be nice to actually know whether people were going to get anything from the Kickstarter or whether I was, so I could go out and buy another dragon, because I've kind of been holding off on buying like a zombie dragon for a long time while I've been waiting to see what happened. and it's quite difficult to get a response from them, unfortunately. And another thing people were complaining about on the Facebook page, not the Facebook page, they were complaining on the Kickstarter about Facebook posts from the creator of Creature Caster, because he's very much, what's the best way to put it? I'm not thinking of the best way to kind of be polite about it. I'm literally just thinking of the best way to word it, because it's not really a bad thing. He made a lot of posts about kind of saving the world and being a nice guy, and every time you make yourself richer, someone else is getting poorer, which makes sense, and there's some validity in all those things. But it rubs some people the wrong way when they see the owner of a company leaving messages like that. And as far as they know, he could just be sitting on all of their money all this time while preaching this kind of anti-greed message. So a few people weren't too pleased with that. Now, I'm sure he's not just sitting on all their money. The one thing that's going around is that the whole thing just went way over budget because they had to switch casters or something. And if that's the case, then it's perfectly understandable, but I don't think that was really announced. So it's kind of leaving people in the dark a little bit, which is never a good thing, especially when a Kickstarter runs 3 years after everyone was supposed to have had their miniatures. I think it's somewhere in the realm of that now. Maybe 2 years, 2.5 years since people were actually supposed to have the models in their hand, and no sign of it yet. Let's see. Throne of Angels. Is that the one by Justin Tan? Yes, that is Arcane Factories. He is actually an incredibly talented guy. But he did get swamped big time after he ran that Kickstarter. And it's not like it did absolutely amazingly well. It did just fund, but I can understand that one being delayed because I kind of know the backstory on that a little bit. Let's see. Rusty. Anyone still waiting for their Drop Fleet Commander pledge? I've heard that quite a few people are still waiting for their Drop Fleet Commander stuff to come in. But there are like new people on the Facebook page popping up every day with their parcels. So it's not like nothing's being sent out. It's just kind of staggered. And then people who are at the back of the queue, because social media is also instant, that they see every time someone else in the world gets their parcel first. So I can see how that would be slightly irritating to someone. But as far as I'm aware, there's not any issues with Hawk Wargames and getting their products out there. I think it was such a mammoth Kickstarter, that one, that it's going to take a while to dispatch everything to everybody. If Hawk Wargames still have the same office that they used to, it's only a very, very tiny place. I would assume they had to bring in extra people to deal with all the Drop Fleet Commander Kickstarter stuff, even just part-time staff for packing it. Or maybe they've got it packed in a big, giant professional distribution center of some sort. I don't know the ins and outs of their business. Haven't really been that into Drop Zone Commander recently either. I should play that again soon. I know there are people in my general area that are really into Drop Zone Commander, so I should get in touch with some of them at some point, try and arrange some games, because my old UCM have just been sat in the drawer untouched for over a year now, I think. Let's see. Any other Kickstarters that I have backed that have been delayed? You know, I could just go onto the Kickstarter website right now and actually look at all the Kickstarters that I've backed, which I'm going to do right now, actually. So let's just log in. Here we go. And if you're wondering why I have to actually look down at my keyboard to type occasionally, it's because I've got a new keyboard, so I have to make sure that my hands are actually starting in the right place, because it's slightly different layout to the old keyboard. Okay, let's have a look. Everything I have backed, and let's see what I'm waiting for. Okay, so the Balls Kickstarter from Macrocosm, I've got those. They were definitely on time. Let's see, what else did I back and actually expect products from? Wasteman, I got my Radical Trevor well on time. I still haven't got around to actually painting him, though. So he's just chilling on the painting table still. Let's see, what else did I back? Cheeks, of course. I backed my own card game on Kickstarter, naturally. And there is some news on that, actually. So over the past couple of weeks, I've been meticulously checking all of the cards to make sure there were no mistakes in any of them, and checking the rules and making sure everything's consistent. And every time you look through huge chunks of text, there's something else that jumps out at you that either is a spelling mistake, or it just looks wrong, or is an inconsistency. Like, for example, the name of the game is Cheeks with an uppercase Z at the end. But then when cheeks are talked about in the rules, it's lowercase. Now, there is actually a reason for it being uppercase in the title and not anywhere else, but I'm not going to go into all that. But it's making sure that it's all consistent throughout the entire thing is really, really, really time-consuming. And it's almost endless. I could be looking at it for the next year and I would pick something else out and be tweaking, but it'd just be pointless nitpicking now. Like, I've used the number 1 there when I really should have used the word 1. Maybe I should change that. And just little details like that you could spend years and years perfecting, but it's not really going to make any difference at all to the game. But hopefully all that is going off to the printers very, very soon, like tomorrow or this week sometime. So it's still on course for people to get their cheeks by Christmas. I'm not sure if it's the same for the German version, but as far as I'm aware, there aren't too many delays with that either. But that's obviously being checked by different people. It would be a bit foolish for me to check the German versions of all the cards and the German rules, but there are people on that as we speak. So hopefully the German backers will have that by Christmas as well. That would be very nice. But unless there are any major glitches with the printing or anything, then it should all be good to go very, very soon. No delays that I know of at the moment, which is very nice. And there's also going to be a promotional card as well, which was made with a very, very amusing piece of art that the artist did, which I'm not going to spoil too much about, but I am going to be possibly walking around handing it out at various events next year. Possibly Salute or the Games Expo, maybe. Maybe those two. So anyone who attends those events has a chance to get the exclusive promotional card, which is a unique character, which is going to be a surprise. Anyway, back to Kickstarter. What else have I backed? Yes, the Knights of Nar, which is also Wasteman related, which I only backed, I think it was last month, so I'm not actually expecting that for a while. And that's 1 miniature. I ordered the Harambe Knight, which, according to this, estimated delivery February 2017. So just a few months to wait for that, hopefully. And I'm thinking of using that as a troll bruiser, perhaps, in my Kings of War Goblin army. I think that would be a suitable use for that model. It seems to be about the right size, and I think that would look pretty cool. Okay, let's see. Any other Kickstarters outstanding? The Kings of War 2nd edition and the Dungeon Saga Kickstarter. I got all that stuff on time. And that's pretty much it. So I haven't had that much experience with Kickstarters that have been horrifically delayed. If anyone else has, let me know. If anyone's got any complaints about Kickstarters, since we're being so controversial tonight, anyone's got anything they want discussed that's been horrendously delayed? Rural Goblin. I live in Australia. No surprise card for me. Well, that's a shame, isn't it? Well, you never know. Maybe someone will get an extra one and send it to you if you ask them nicely. You never know. I'm sure sending a card to Australia would only cost in the region of about £1,000. Ethan Love says Defiance Games Alien War. Well, I've never heard of that. If that's delayed, that's the first I've heard of it, because it's the first I've heard of the game. Let's see. Okay, while people are possibly coming up with any more Kickstarters that were delayed while we're on that topic, let's go on to the next question. Mickey Genver, are there any good Halloween war games? We need spoopy games this weekend. Which is the best? War games. Now, if it's specifically war games and not board games, that does significantly narrow it down. I'm struggling to think of any Halloween or spooky themed war games. The closest thing I could think of would maybe be Malifaux. Some of that stuff is quite horrific and scary looking. I can't think of too many other games that have any kind of spooky theme that are classed as a war game, though. If anyone knows of any, then drop them in the chat. Dice Miniature Paint Guy says Walking Dead. I'd say that's slightly more of a board game. There's kind of war game elements to it, but it's kind of it's riding the line, isn't it, between board game and war game, from what I know. Ethan Love, Conflict 47. I'm not that sure that's particularly scary. It does have werewolves in it, but I don't think nowadays a werewolf qualifies as scary. Werewolves and vampires have had a big hit to their reputation in the last decade or so, after a certain franchise grew in popularity and kind of turned them into wimps. Let's see. Mickey Jen by Malifaux is a good idea. Yep, sounds about right. In terms of board games, though, there are tons of zombie board games. Just the whole community could probably name a different one each. Everyone in the chat right now could name a different zombie board game, I would say. So many of them out there. The big one, of course, the Zombicide, I think, is the main one. Let's see. Dice Miniature Paint Guy. The werewolf sculpts are nice from Conflict 47. Yes, they are quite nice. Okay, what's next? Paul was asking about Kickstarters, but we already covered that. Let's see. This is from Sean. If you had to pick a favourite army, whatever game it may be, what would it be and why? Now, I think he originally asked what's your favourite Age of Sigmar army, but of course this isn't the Age of Sigmar show. This is the one show where Age of Sigmar is a no-go zone. But I'm going to very quickly answer the Age of Sigmar section of it first by showing you something that I just finished painting, because I'm playing a game of Age of Sigmar tomorrow, and I've been getting these guys ready pretty much all week. Let's see if the camera is going to focus on this beast. Come on. I've got it so close it should be focused. It has no choice but to focus on it. There's nothing else it could be focusing on. How close does it want to be? It kind of focuses, actually, when you put it right up there in the lens. There we go. That's way more detailed than you normally see on a miniature when you're seeing it at this close range. So, yeah. Some more of those painted, ready for the game tomorrow. So that's another squad of them done. And then I've got a game of 40k on Sunday as well. And I'm not sure what I'm actually going to use, because we're having some small 750 point games, but none of my armies are that great in low points, because I've got Deathwing, so I'd get about 4 models for 750 points, or I've got my crabby Chaos Marines, but I don't have very many of those. So I'm leaning towards Dark Angels, but I might just have to take less Terminators and more other stuff, just so I can have maybe 5 models on the table instead of 3. But anyway, the question was, what are my favourite armies in any game system? That is a really, really tricky one. Just thinking, I'm mentally going through all the drawers full of miniatures that are just over there. I'm thinking, what's in each one? I do really like the bolt action Belgians. I do really like the Newham for relics. Those two are definitely near the top. And then for the Warhammer type games, dwarves have always been my first love. But nowadays, they don't really measure up to all the new stuff. So whenever they come out with some new dwarves, they could take the place of everything at the undisputed #1, potentially, if they look nice. Anything else? I think that's pretty much it in terms of favourite armies. I've obviously got particular favourites in each game, but just overall, between all the systems, it's very, very difficult. Dino Titan Edition says Space Marines. Space Marines indeed. Let's have a look at the next question then. This is from Mr. Bazooka. Do you actually do anything at Halloween? I never have at all. Lol. No. The main thing I do on Halloween is not answer the door to children. Last year, I don't think any children actually came to the door. It only seems to happen once every few years or so, when some local parent decides it's a great idea to trawl around with a gaggle of youngsters late at night. When I say late at night, it's usually only about 7 p.m. that they decide to go out. So avoiding answering the door is number one on Halloween related activities, and that's about it. If it happens to fall on a day that I'm doing some kind of live show, then I would do a Halloween special, obviously. This is a semi-Halloween special. There's going to be a spoopy story at the end, which is going to be very spoopy indeed. Other than that, no. Let's see. A Choitnik says, place an empty bag on a door handle with the sign saying, please take one. That doesn't sound very nice. There's always the option to just post them something violently through the letterbox, or the mailbox, as the Americans might say. Anyone else? Dress as a pumpkin. No, it's a nice colour, but no, it's a bit much. I don't think I'd be able to get through doors if I was that shape. And there is kind of a pumpkin theme going on here anyway, with all this delightful orange going on. I've even got an orange t-shirt on underneath as well. Going all the way or not at all when it comes to orange. Okay, I think that was all the questions from Facebook. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of deliveries that I had today, one of which woke me up. So, Deep Cut Studios, I've had a lava mat from there before, the big 6x4 battle mat, and they sent me another one, which is a snow, kind of tundra themed. They were supposed to send it me last time, but they actually sent me the wrong one, which was kind of my mistake and kind of theirs, because the one that I didn't want, to my eye, looked exactly the same as a different one. So maybe it's just because my eyes aren't that great with colour, but there were two very similar mats, and I specified, I don't want that one, I want this one. And I think they thought the one I didn't want was the one I actually did, or something like that. So I've got the right one now, and the one that I don't need, because I already had it, I'm actually going to pass that along to Mr. Remington next time he's here. I'm not going to post it to him because it's so big it would be ridiculously expensive, but next time he's up here he can take that away with him, because I don't need two of them. But this one is a nice snow one, which fits in very nicely with my Kings of War goblins, and it'll look nice with any of my armies, really. Stormcast or dwarves or something on there would look nice as well, even though the bases don't really match it, but you can't expect that when you're having these battles on lots of different kind of terrain. The bases are only ever going to match one type. So as long as you make the bases vaguely neutral, either that or you go completely nuts with the base, so it's just that the base is kind of part of the model. Like if you've got a Lizardman army, you just go absolutely nuts with jungle stuff all over the bases. Even if you're just putting them out in the snow, it still fits because the units are all like that. It looks like they're just bringing a little bit of the jungle with them into the snow, perhaps. Let's see, Mickey Jennifer, he will appreciate that. Yes, he will, I'm sure, because Mr. Remington, he doesn't like when other people get free stuff and he doesn't. He's not a big fan of that at all. And it doesn't occur to him that maybe he would be offered free stuff if he actually, did videos once in a while, other than just turned up half asleep and ill-informed on my channel once a week. Boom, put that in your pipe and smoke that, Remington. I'm sure someone's going to pass that information along to him because I can't see him watching all the way into this show. Okay, also, the other parcel, I'm going to do a video on that snow mat, by the way. If people are going to send you things, that's the least you can do, really, isn't it? The other things I got were both from Mantic, Dead Zone Plague Faction Booster. So I have almost everything in the Plague range now. So in this box, there is some Troopers, the new plastic ones, which is very nice. The real plastic on a sprue. There are some zombies, which are real zombies on a sprue. And then in the old Restic, there's the Aberration Plague Teraton, a Plague Hound, so I've got 3 of those now, and a Plague Swarm. So I've got pretty much everything I could need for my Dead Zone forces. I'm just going to crack open the box and just show you the spruey goodness in here. So a couple of sprues, which everyone was begging for a long time from Mantic, for Dead Zone particularly, that they drop the old restic and move into plastic. So some of the miniatures are certainly doing that now. Also, I've noticed there seems to be almost too many models in here, because in this little pack here that has the Plague Teraton and the Plague Swarm and the Hound, there seems to be some old restic troopers in there as well. So I think I've actually got more models than advertised on the box. I don't know whether that's just because I'm such an A-list celebrity that I just get extra stuff, but who knows. And then also in there there's the old Aberration. He is gigantic. Look at the size of that thing. I've actually borrowed one of these to use in a tournament before, and it did quite well. He has a wooden base as well. Cool. So I'm going to do a video on all this stuff as well, just having a little quick dig through it now for informational purposes. And also, I got this bad boy. Oh, bits of it falling everywhere. Dead Zone, Contagion, Nexus, Psi, or Psi expansion. So if there's any of the bases that are dropped on the floor, don't panic. Captain Mannering. Okay, so there's a load of terrain in this, which you can never have too much Dead Zone terrain, can you? There's quite a few sprues. I'm not even going to get them all out because there's a lot. Some of them are just in the bags. These are the newer pieces of terrain, I think. Or actually, these look like the old ones. But with the stuff that they produce new, they put it in a bag, which is good from their standpoint because it takes up less space in the box, so they can store more of it more easily. And it's good for the consumers because you're not having to snip things off the sprue. And in fact, they even do a good job like cleaning up the edges as well a little bit. You can usually not tell where they've clipped it off the sprue. So I'm sure they have like an army of trained chimps or something in their dungeon, just feverishly clipping these bits of terrain out of the sprue and bagging them up for them. And there are also more plague miniatures in here as well, some more plague zombies. So I think I'm going to have enough of them now. And there's also a metal brand new Plague Dr. Simmons in there as well somewhere at the bottom of the box, no doubt. So we'll put all that back in. And then there's also a book with it, which is right here. There we go, the lovely book, which not only contains new rules for particular models and rules for elite army lists, so with different stuff in them, presumably. Rules for the new Plague Dr. Simmons, who I already have the old one, so I could just use these new rules now. And I think this could actually become my leader of choice, because I much prefer her special ability to the big stage 1, whose ability is more random. Hers is a table that gives an ability to one of your troops, and it's not random. You can just pick which one you want, which is much nicer. So I like the sound of that. And there is also rules in here, as well as some missions. There is a kind of a single-player campaign, which wouldn't ordinarily interest me, but if there's some kind of huge buzz from the audience that they would like to see me play that and report on it on video, then let me know. If anyone would be interested in seeing the one-player Dead Zone experience against a load of zombies, then let me know. There are also some pictures of miniatures in here that I don't recognise. Some plague stuff. And I'm just going to hold it up to the camera right now. Let's see. Can you see them? They're kind of big fat things. Oh, it's focusing nicely on them, isn't it? I'm not sure what they are. Whether they're something that's coming out soon or whether they're something that's not available anymore, I don't know. But I don't recognise them at all. So it's going to be interesting to see if that's a thing coming up soon, because they do look quite tasty. Not tasty in the actual taste buds sense. I'm sure they would taste rather foul if they've got the plague, but quite tasty visually as far as miniatures go. So I'm looking forward to getting all this plague stuff painted, and it's going to be quite easy to do actually, because my particular technique for painting the plague miniatures is very, very quick and easy. It involves airbrushing and then a lot of dry brushing mostly. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Apparently they were in the Warpath Kickstarter, says Throne of Angels, and a Choitnik at the same time. Well, I'm looking forward to them coming out then because they look quite nice. Plague Bursters, apparently they're called. Yeah, I should have paid more attention to the Warpath Kickstarter, shouldn't I? Although when that was a thing, I don't think I was even interested in Dead Zone at that point. So definitely on the Dead Zone bandwagon at the moment and looking forward to getting some video done on that. Someone suggested that I could get kind of a cake turntable and put my Dead Zone board on top of there and then rotate it around so I could just have a still camera pointing at it. And that is a very interesting idea. I might look into that because I want to do Dead Zone videos. It's just difficult deciding how best to format the battle reports because it's kind of all action. There isn't a natural point where you can stop and say, okay, this is what's happened in this turn because there's so much going on. And it's way too much to do it activation by activation and say, okay, this guy did this, because you're basically having to play the game about 4 times as long because you're having to describe everything you just did and turn the camera on and off every 2 minutes. So I don't know whether that would be doable or whether I should just film the whole thing and then cut out the pauses. But we shall see. But a rotating Dead Zone table could be in my future. I've already got the piece of wood. I just need to actually build onto it now. So I think that's going to be pretty tasty. Let's see. What do I want to discuss now? Anything else? Or shall we move on to the spooky story? I think I've covered everything that I had in my notes, my very expansive notes that were 5 lines this week. Okay, I think it might be time to go on to the spooky story then, because we've been going for about an hour, considering the technical difficulties with the first attempt at this show that has now been stricken from history, apart from me just mentioning it there. So I think we should turn off the light for this, because it's going to get very, very spoopy. Okay, here we go. Turning off the light. I'm not wearing the mask, though, because it makes it very difficult to hear me. So, turning off the light. Oh. How scary is that, folks? Hold on. I know what I could do to make it even spoopier. Let's see. I could get a kind of ultra spoopy torch effect coming up from my phone here. Let's try that. How's that? Is that very spoopy? I suppose it's fairly spoopy, isn't it? Hope this isn't killing the atmosphere for anybody, me tinkering like this. Okay, let's just go like this. Once upon a time, lived a young lady named Mickey. Little did she know she was about to embark in a tale of terror. But this was no ordinary tale, for this truly took place. You might even call it her own death. Bum, 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 bum. Mickey was a young lady enjoying a luxurious balloon ride. It had been a fun day of airborne adventure among the clouds. But it grew dark and it was time to land and settle down for the night in a tent. She had the smallest tent. The largest tent on the campsite went to Giant Bob, named such because he was 7 feet tall, missing all of his teeth, and had an eye patch. Quite a spooky-looking fellow indeed. As Mickey attempted to sleep, she heard voices outside her tent. She unzipped her sleeping bag, poked her head out, and saw her giant comrade talking to a local fellow. She listened into their conversation, and it went a little bit like this. So what are you saying? Well, folk round these parts, they say there's a beast in the woods, you see. Goes by the name of Newbie, is what they say. Snatches people up during the night. He's been at it for over 50 years, they say. I don't believe any of this rubbish. Get off our campsite. Don't say I didn't warn you, my giant friend. When the Newbie comes a-calling. Mickey retreated into her tent, into her sleeping bag, zipped it up tightly, and fell asleep. Several hours passed, but the sun did not yet come up. Mickey was roused in her slumber by a tap, 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 tap on the side of the tent. The faintest of sounds, surely only the wind, or a tree branch, or perhaps a small field mouse, or a snake. But she suspected it was none of these things. She saw a shadowy figure, a large figure, but not quite large enough to be her gigantic comrade, looming next to the tent. The words spoken by the mysterious stranger in the campsite bellowed around her head. She knew who it was. She knew it was the Newbie beast. She squirmed into the corner of her tent as it began to scratch the fabric very slowly and tenderly, almost like it was caressing lovingly. A tent. A small incision was made, and a thick, grubby, filthy fingernail poked through, ripping the fabric all the way down from the top to the ground. Mickey was in stunned silence, unable to shriek for help. She decided there was only one course of action. She crawled as fast as her arms and legs would carry her, out of the tent, through the main flap, and into another tent. What was at first relief, having found her friend Margaret, turned to shock and terror as she saw that Margaret's face had been removed. Blood dripped down her neck and the side of her head into her hair. Mickey suppressed a scream until she looked up and saw the face mounted on the side of the tent, a look of horror etched onto its features even in death and removal. Mickey couldn't suppress that scream any longer, and she let it out. She heard movement, but not as much movement as one would expect under the circumstances. When a loud scream goes up in a camping site, one would expect all the campers to jump to attention and investigate. But the only sound she heard was a kind of dragging, heavy limp coming towards the tent from the direction of her tent. She knew who and what it was immediately. She left this tent hurriedly and ran as fast as she could into the woods. Complete pitch darkness, but the dragging limp continued behind her, not seemingly getting further away in spite of her lightning-quick speed through the undergrowth, being careful not to trip on tree branches. Eventually, however, she did trip, sprained her ankle on a tree root, and fell into a pile of leaves. She looked up around her, but all was completely black. so her efforts to discern her location and the location of the potential assailant were in vain. She heard the limp draw closer. Closer still. A twig snapped, tipping her off that the beast was to the left. She turned to the left, brandishing a stick that she found on the ground, and thrust it forward into the darkness. She heard a squelch, and she felt thick, creamy moisture running up the twig onto her hand, and she let go immediately. She heard the following sound, followed by a large mass collapsing on the ground. She felt around with her hands, felt a large, sweaty figure. She did not hesitate, and she immediately turned back towards the campsite, the only place she could see a light in the distance. She hobbled along as fast as she could on her heavily sprained ankle. And when she got back, she was met with a strange sight. All the campers, even her friend Margaret, whose face now seemed to be back in its natural position, were looking around the campsite. For her. "Mickey, Mickey," they cried. Mickey wandered back towards them, and they each greeted her with glee, wondering where she had gone. She explained what had happened. She even explained the part about Margaret's missing face. Everyone seemed confused, asking if she'd been drinking, perhaps, or whether she'd just had a nightmare and woken up with a start and wandered off into the woods. She told them of the beast that pursued her. She led them all into the woods in an attempt to find the corpse. With their light sources, it was much easier to navigate the undergrowth. She was assisted along with her sprained ankle by two of the campers. She reached what she thought was the spot, and in fact, there was a pool of thick, disgusting blood on the leaves, but there was no sign of a body. Just a large track, as if something had been dragged away into the woods. She heard a sound. They all heard a sound, as if a tree was falling in the distance. They turned towards it, made their way through the woods in its general direction. When they got there, they saw that a tree had indeed been felled, but not by chainsaw, by something heavy barreling through it, ripping it from the earth. However, there was a sheer drop after the tree, so anything that had ploughed through this area had surely plummeted to its doom. Or had it? Had it indeed? To be continued. Bum 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 bum. Okay. That's enough of that. Let's turn that off. And let's get the actual light back on, shall we? Whew, there we go. You can relax now, ladies and gentlemen. I've decided that I'm actually going to continue with that spooky story next week, since we're still in Halloween season, technically. And you can be sure there's going to be a bone-chilling climax. Because when Newbie's around, bad things, they just gonna happen. That's just how it Anyway, Andrew Fairbanks, I guess I'll go change my pants now. Yes, you will. And let's see the viewer count. Oh, a few people dropped out during that story. I think they were too petrified. Oh dear, oh dear. Just going through the comments now. Since my eyes were locked on the camera the whole time, I wasn't really looking. There's a few lols. A few OMGs. Yeah, so if you're ever going to go camping in the woods, watch out. Okay, I think we can wrap this one up there then, ladies and gentlemen. It's been about an hour and 20 minutes, this show, which is a pretty solid length, I think you'll agree. And Halloween is on Monday, isn't it? Which is, of course, not the Andy and Rem show, which is Tuesday, but we may do something vaguely Halloween-themed on Tuesday. I think I only heard one firework during this entire show, which is good, because right before I started, there was quite a big firework display somewhere in the local vicinity. So I'm glad that's dried up a bit over the last hour and a half. And I think with that, it's time to say goodnight, ladies and gentlemen. Try not to have too terrible nightmares, but I'm afraid it's unavoidable. Try not to have nightmares about any large, hulking, sweaty monsters stalking you in the woods. If you can. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Sleep tight. And don't let the newbie bite.